Welcome back to Tapped In. We are here for episode 10, in which we'll be discussing why we started Lawft. I'm Anna Summersett here with Benson Varghese. And let's just kick it off with, what is Lawft?
Lawft is a law practice management platform, and it is intended to help lawyers and law firms scale and grow, in addition to all the other things that these platforms generally do.
When would you say, truly the story of Lawft began? Like, when did you first kind of conceptualize this was something you wanted to do?
That's an interesting question, because rewind a decade, or 11 years ago, as a prosecutor at the DA's office, and never imagined being in private practice, much less someday starting a software company. But in starting the firm and really growing the firm, we felt a lot of pain points that the offerings, the law practice management platforms that were available, were not able to address. As a starting point, all law practice management platforms do one thing, which is help you manage cases and clients. But none of them were really focused on law firm growth and the systems and the processes you need to grow a law firm. So we really felt that pain. And from that, the idea was not to create a software. What I ended up doing is talking to the platform we were using. I ended up talking to them a great deal about things that we would like to see that would be really helpful. And what you realize through those conversations is at some point companies can become too large to be nimble, but it's also perhaps not their focus, right? I think there's a lot of focus on the solo practitioner, and there's a lot of focus on large size firms. There's not a lot of focus on what does it take to go from being a solo to, let's say, a mid-sized firm. So we saw that gap in the market because we felt that gap in the market. And so I was talking to our platform, the one we used at the time, and I was shopping.
Are you not allowed to say their name?
Well, I'm being nice. And I was shopping, and I spoke to other vendors. And so we've talked to, at that point, all of the major vendors,
right,
looking for a solution. And the more you get into this, the more you realize, some were developed as closed gardens. They didn't want to interface with anyone else. That brought in limitations. There were platforms that on the surface looked like they could offer you everything, but the reality was they were companies that had been purchased along the way, and these teams were merged together and features were merged together. I remember talking to one of the major players, and their intake system and their case management system required two different sign-ons. Right. So these are really different systems that, yes, on the surface, they can tell you, hey, we do all these things.
Right.
So the idea of starting this on my own really came out of that frustration of there's no one addressing this segment of the market, the pain points we're feeling. And if you look at legal generally, there is a movement towards consolidation, right? It's becoming harder and harder for solo practitioners to make it just on their own.
Right.
So the market's changing. There are more law firms where there used to be more solo practitioners. And there are more law firms kind of at that small to medium size where how you grow is so important. So all of that is really the reason why we sat down and talked for a good while about whether we wanted to take this on in addition to growing a law firm and growing a family. And, you were ultimately supportive.
Ultimately supportive, which means not initially supportive.
Well,
there's a lot of big questions that come into this, right? You have a successful business, you have a growing law practice, we are busy enough as is, and then you're like, hey, let's start another business. And I'm just like, my mind's exploding with all the ifs, ands, or buts about how this is going to work. But I want to go back to something you said earlier, which I think is really interesting and very true, which is the shape of the legal market has really changed, especially in the last 5 years, I would say, from where you have these huge gaps in the market between, your solo practitioners and your large, corporate box firms. And now you're getting a lot more middle ground. And I attribute some of that to a lot of the law firm growth companies that we've seen. And I know we've worked with one, Crisp, and have had tremendous success with them. And what they're really all teaching, even though I think Crisp is doing it the best, is they're teaching lawyers how to be business people. And when you teach lawyers how to be business people, and not just lawyers, what happens? I mean, their business grows.
Absolutely.
And when their business grows, they start to grow out of the tools that got them, to first base. And they start looking at, how do I get to second? How do I get third? How do I get home? And I think it's interesting that to date, and when you started Lawft, was really the same conversation, which is what we're looking for does not exist and is so necessary to help us get from point A to point B. So was there a specific frustration or a specific moment when you're like, we have to do this?
When you talk about growing your law firm, one of the things that's really important is knowing your metrics. And absolutely, we would go to events where there are big firms around us. And one of the things that was apparent is they knew their metrics, right? And at some level, when you have 100 attorneys or 200 attorneys, you have systems in place that tell you everything you need to know about everything. And here we were, as let's say a 10-person shop or a 15-person shop, and we didn't know those metrics like the back of our hand.
That's because I couldn't press a button and get them. It was like you had to download all the information, sort all the information, do your own calculations. It was a nightmare.
Absolutely. So being able to get behind the numbers and to have the numbers was critically important to us, whether we're talking about intake, where our cases came from, conversion numbers, resolutions, things as simple as, are we thanking our referral partners? We had no way of tracking any of that. And one of the things long before we contemplated adopting a platform is you've always hated the idea of having 10 different platforms to do 10 different things.
Right.
So all of that together led to both the frustration and also the solution is within reach.
Right. And I think where I kind of jumped over the fence to join you in this endeavor was I was sitting down one month running our monthly key performance indicators and all of our revenue metrics and looking at our growth projections and trying to forecast when to hire people and what to spend on marketing and what is our ROI on these certain things. And it took hours and hours and hours, and most of it just manual entry and calculation and pulling information from multiple sources into one place and trying to make sense of it. And when you convinced me that there is a way for us to house and compile and calculate and use all of this information to give you the answers to the questions that you have, I was like, okay, let's do it, because we're all wasting way too much time. And that's the thing I think that frustrates me as a non-tech person is I'm like, the information's there, right? They have the data. They just don't have a tool where I can access it the way I need to access it, right? And when you're in meetings asking questions like, this lawyer's billables versus their collectibles versus their, holidays versus how many cases they have, and you're not able to get that information quickly, it signals to me that whoever's developing the tool just doesn't have a basic understanding of what law firms need to grow and what questions they're going to be asking. And I think that was really the unique perspective that you had in creating Lawft is, you're a lawyer, I'm a lawyer, we run a law practice. We run a law practice with multiple different practice areas with different billing foundations. I mean, we know all the questions to ask, and we know how to get the information out that would be actionable. And that was really the turning point for me, I think.
Absolutely. Our perspective was unique. It was unique in the sense that we're lawyers, as you said. It's the reason we have the catchphrase of built by lawyers for lawyers. That's very true. This was all developed from our pain points. And as founders, we are lawyers. We're still practicing lawyers. But the other piece of this is we're not first-time founders, right? You and I started this law firm. We know what it takes to grow, and we know intimately the pain points of growth and the metrics you need to be able to see for growth. And we talked a lot about metrics, all the functionality, right? All the questions we kept asking ourselves, why doesn't X platform do Y? because it would make our lives so much easier.
Right.
That's the insight we bring to Lawft and how we've developed everything around Lawft.
Right. Well, there's a show I love called The Newsroom with Jeff Daniels. It's amazing. If you haven't seen it, you have to go see it. But one of the scenes that I love that I always think about when we're talking about Lawft and what Lawft does is there's a clip of Sloan Sabbath, who's the financial journalist in the show, and she's staring at her Bloomberg terminal, right? And she's staring at it, she's clicking, and she's like in the zone. And this other journalist comes in and he asks her like a personal question, and she doesn't even look up from the computer. And he's like, "You're not going to find the answer in there." And she's like, "How do you know?" And it's because that's where all of her data is. She thinks she can get all of her answers from there. And I feel that way sometimes about the key performance indicators and the metrics and the revenue and the profit. I mean, all the data, just the copious amounts of data that we have and that we keep track of. Like when you're trying to answer a question within a firm about whether somebody is in it for the long haul, right? Whether they feel connected to the firm culture. It's not just the interpersonal relationship you can look at or their behavior within the office. You could literally go to the Lawft terminal and see like their progress over time and answer a lot of those questions. But when we talk about the very beginning stages of Lawft, what were some doubts that you had about doing this?
Yeah, certainly a huge doubt was, is this really viable? In the sense that the only people in this space are massive.
Mammoth.
Right? You've got one leader in the market that's privately held over $1 billion in valuation. The other's pretty close. You've got some other players in the market who are all extremely well funded. And this is just you and me in terms of funding. Right. We have a lot of people on the development side.
We were approached about that at the ABA Tech competition that we went to last year. We had several people come up to us and, "Oh, that sounds great." Or, "I've always wanted my, software to do that, but what are you thinking?" Like you're going up against billion-dollar companies who can just like not only outspend you, outlast you, bury you into the ground, but they can also just reproduce whatever great idea that you have. Tell me what you've seen over the past few years, because you've been putting up some of your features on the website and telling people some of the things that Lawft is capable of doing. What have you seen about the larger companies coming in and swooping up those ideas, if you've seen it at all?
So, the ABA Tech Show was really eye-opening in so many regards. But one of the things I had not anticipated was, I can't think of an exception, so I'm going to say this as a generality. Everyone there that was a new player had a very specific product that did one thing. Mm-hmm. So the idea that there would be another platform there was a little confusing to most visitors. They were surprised. They'd stopped at all the other booths, and it was always a question of, what do you do? Okay, great. You do this one thing. Fantastic. And then they get to us, and we're talking about Lawft, and it does everything that we want it to do. And yes, we got that question of why. You have My Case and Clio and all these people who are not only in it with large sums of money, they're at this conference. Like, you have to walk past 40,000 square feet of space they've taken up in front of you. And that was eye-opening, not only in the sense of they're only big players in this space, but also no one else is getting into it, right? There are a lot of people that are held back, and therefore the part of the market that we're trying to address is not getting addressed. In terms of what I'm sharing with the public in regards to the features that we've developed in Lawft, our moats are not just the features that we're building. Our moat is really, what are we equipping law firms to do, right? And that's built into the DNA of Lawft. And no one is doing what we're doing, which is helping law firms grow, giving them the tools and the insights and the systems and the processes. And we're also doing this from the ground up, right? We're not a hodgepodge of different software companies that have been purchased and merged together. And we have the unique insight. I don't know of another lawyer founder, and certainly I've looked at every platform I've heard of, that's the person behind the launch of the software, right?
Mhm.
And of course, as companies grow, they will go get their in-house lawyer who's their advisor.
Right.
But from the ground up, from day one, this is what we are, what we've been about. And I believe those insights are not replicable, right? That's our moat, is we're lawyers building for lawyers.
Right. And I agree with you in the sense of, and we've seen some of these larger companies, they'll go and have attorney advisors and they'll sit on the board and they'll tell them, oh, that's not really how that works. That's not really what you want it to do. But the problem is at that point, it's already built, right? And they either have to go back and refactor the whole thing, which once you have all the subscribers they have, they're not going to do, right? Or you got to use these plugins to try to, create a different pathway to accomplish what the lawyers ultimately need, to accomplish. But I think what's interesting about Lawft is that we're not set on providing a tool for law firm growth the way law firms have traditionally grown. And what I mean by that is a lot of times law firms think growth is people, right? More people, more lawyers, more people, more paralegals, more people answering the phones. And I think what's really exceptional about what Lawft does is it creates these automations and these efficiencies where you can grow successfully without necessarily more people, right? And it allows you to really, hone in your attention and put your money where it's most needed in terms of personnel, because you have the right tools that are doing all the things that are just kind of repeatable, rote, part of the everyday practice of law that don't need that human element and that human touch. And I think that's a huge part of what's missing conceptually about how tech companies think law firms grow. We're starting to see some of it with the larger firms. You see some reduction in force conversations, and some are engaging in rifts because the introduction of AI and the introduction of automations and things becoming more efficient, and they just don't need all the hands on. But you and I both know that it takes, a solid decade for that to trickle down to the middle firms and even the solo practitioners. And what I love about Lawft is it provides a tool where you can do it now.
Right. There are some other interesting observations about the timing of how we developed Lawft. What we see with the large players in the market right now is they're all retooling.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's sprinkling a little bit of AI dust on top and saying we have AI features. Sometimes it is extensive retooling to implement actual AI features. But our timing was such that we are an AI first company. And I don't mean that in the sense that we're using AI for everything, because in legal, I think you have to be careful with what you do with AI. But the idea that we could conceptualize something like sentiment detection, which is AI and analyzing and giving you a red, yellow, or green light for the types of messages you're receiving from clients so that you can hopefully identify issues before they percolate, boil over, was something we could conceptualize, use AI for in a way that really can't cause any harm, right? Let's say AI for some reason got it wrong and gave you a red light instead of a green. No harm, no foul, right? We're not using it for things that could make lawyers the next ChatGPT lawyer, right? You don't want to become infamous for your poor use of AI or the lack of guardrails. But it is an interesting time to be building. We're able to reach what the market is looking for much faster, right? We're not a company that's been built on a decade of doing things one way without the benefit of AI, right? We were talking about automations before a single line of code was written because we knew there were efficiencies in there. We were talking about increasing the level of service to clients through things that our platform could do, which in turn reduces what humans have to do. And that's not to say necessarily a reduction in manpower. We have always said this at our office. We want people to do the things that they're best at, that bring them joy, that they went to school for, not create the next template or fill out the next template and type in words like you're, filling out a form. That's not what people come to law firms to do. That's not what gives them satisfaction.
Well, and I think it's important too to understand the gap that exists for most people between what they know AI is capable of doing and what they're willing to use AI for. And I don't just mean like a desire to use it. Like we all know what it can do, what it can accomplish, but just the lack of comfortability with using it. And that's one of the things that's so great about the way you've built Lawft with AI coming on board at the same time is that it almost is forcing people to use it, right? In a way that makes sense, in a way that's proper, because it becomes part of their process in using the software. And it's not, they don't have to go to this browser and add on this, application and then type the thing in over here and then download it and then put it over into this app and make it do this other thing. Like, it is built into the software and it makes it almost second nature to use it. I mean, I would venture to say some of the staff here use AI in Lawft and don't even realize that that's what's happening, right? Because it's built in to their just everyday process. But if you were to go back and remember when you first started Lawft, like, what would you identify as a difficult moment, or a moment when you thought, okay, did we underestimate what this was going to be or how much work this was going to take?
People often ask me what was the actual process of starting this. And for me, I wrote a 40-page manifesto of all the things that I wanted.
Here's what I hate about law firm practice software.
That I wanted my platform to do long before we even got the name Lawft. And I sent it to developers to basically interview them. And my question was, what tech stack would you use to develop this? And their response would help guide me on whether I wanted to interview them. So I thought my 40-page manifesto was every great idea I could come up with. But what I didn't know then, that I still feel the pain of today, is there are always more good ideas, right? You will not get through a day without thinking, man, this is something that I could bring in that would improve the quality of life for practitioners and clients. And you have to temper all your ideas with, what do I need to get to the public now so that people can use this product?
Right.
And be willing to say, I've got a whole silo of things that I'm working on.
Yeah, this idea of a minimally viable product. And I remember you saying this, Anna, we're going to go to market with our minimally viable product on X date. And that was like a year and a half ago. Yeah. And that's not to say that you don't have a minimally viable product. You had it then. But I can see how excited you get about new features and new ideas, and you want to incorporate new and exciting things, and you want the software to be all of the things in your manifesto and then some before it reaches people. And my position at this point, which I know we disagree on, but my position is it is already better than anything we had, right? It is already better than the system, we still use for our archives. Like, it is better, and it can help people now, and we can always continue to refine. I mean, you could refine technology indefinitely. So at what point do you say it's ready?
I'll admit that a lot of last year I spent adding new features because, yes, candidly, I get very excited about it. I want to have a product that is out of the box, just so compelling that folks say, why would I go anywhere else? And there's a lot of thought about where we're positioning ourselves in the market, because I won't say there aren't some niche companies out there that can't do a lot of what we'll be offering. But what I found out during this process is, if you want one of those platforms, the kind of platforms the big firms were talking about having all the data at their fingertips, they pay 6 figures to onboard. And oftentimes, plus. And oftentimes it's not even the platform that's doing the onboarding. They're paying for a platform, then they're going to pay a third party to onboard them with all of their data in it. And then you have the most common names you hear, and they're whatever they are, $60 a month, $150 a month, somewhere in that range. And there's no one, again, in the middle. Right. So when I think about what we're going to offer to the public, I know I'm competing with the guys up here that are charging 6 figures. Right. Those are the features we've built, and I'm not charging that. Right. So I'm very excited about what I want to bring to the public and that we've built. And 70 of our users have been using it every day for the development period, right?
Mhm.
So you're right. We have a minimally viable product. What I've been doing, I would say in this last quarter, which will be the last quarter before, or at least the last phase before we launch publicly, is really focusing on performance. So in the last quarter, I keep saying quarter, from January of this year, we haven't added new features. All I've done is talk to the developers about, we want everything to run smoothly and quickly.
Mhm.
And we want it to operate in such a way that people don't feel any lag anywhere. So that's really been our focus. And as soon as we get through what I would call those performance optimizations, we're going to launch publicly. And of course, on the back end, there's a lot that we're working on too, right? There's an advantage to launching now as opposed to launching 5 years ago or 10 years ago, which is now there are so many agentic sales systems that in the past, if you wanted to launch a SaaS software at scale, you'd have to have 5 people sitting in your office, making outbound calls, taking the inbound leads that are coming in. So as the platform is getting ready to be launched, we're also working on what does support look like, which is different than supporting the 70 people here, and what do sales look like. All right. So there's some things that we are working on to launch that's not really related to the platform itself. It's just we've got to have these pieces in place to successfully launch.
Well, so let's talk about the launch. And I want to start with, who is Lawft really built for, right? Who's the ideal customer?
Well, I would love to rewind the clock and hand Lawft to myself 11 years ago, right? So anyone who is interested in growing their law practice, that could be a solo practitioner, it could be a mid-sized law firm. And what we've built can work at enterprise, right? But when I think about why we built this, I'm thinking about the people I want to see grow. And as we've talked about, I go to lunch with people and talk about law firm growth. I wrote a book on law firm growth. I'm an open book, but it's basically all those ideas that we have proven through execution to be ideas that work that have been built into Lawft. So I'm looking for people who want to grow.
Is there anybody who's maybe not a good fit to use Lawft?
Well, I'll walk you through who we have very intentionally thought about in terms of practice areas or financial models, because we have flat fee cases in criminal, we have hourly cases in family law, and we have contingency cases in personal injury. And the system is very robust in those areas. If someone had a model that didn't fall into one of these three, so we do have a subscription model where law firms could set up a subscription for legal fees, but it would have to be something outside of what we've really thought about. And candidly, we have built around what we know, right? So is it theoretically possible that someone could have some sort of a model that's so different than all the common ones we hear about it? And of course, we've talked to other law firm owners and we've built for the needs that we know exist. So it's theoretically possible. It's also possible that if you have already scaled and you're satisfied with your growth, or you're already at enterprise, then this isn't what you're looking for, right? And
well, do you think, because obviously Lawft has got a lot of features that are very forward thinking, and you've modernized in such a way that you've incorporated artificial intelligence, you've incorporated automations. Do you have any concern that people who aren't particularly technologically savvy would have a difficult time using it?
So when I first started this project, I had that concern. But as we rolled Lawft out, and we have people of not only all ages at our firm, but also all types of comfortability with technology. And it's been remarkable to see the people that I thought might hesitate to use a new platform, how they've embraced it and they love it. And as you pointed out, if the system works smoothly, people aren't thinking about the technology behind it.
Mm-hmm.
They're just using it. And so we've set up Lawft to be as simple as you need it to be. Even the dashboard is customizable. You can take all of the cards off if you don't want to see them.
Mm-hmm.
You can rearrange them. You can set it up to see the things that are important to you. So it is designed to be as user-friendly as it can be.
So 5 years from now, where do you hope Lawft is?
I hope Lawft is being used nationwide and that people are elevating the level of service they provide to their clients because of what Lawft offers. And I hope to improve access to justice, because not every person that uses Lawft is going to be thinking about, what can I do to maximize our revenue? That's certainly one part of it, or profitability. But the other really important part of this is, with efficiency, you're driving down your cost per case. So let's say you're a public defender, someone who takes court-appointed cases, you're doing public interest work. The fact that you're able to be more efficient means you're able to help more people, right? So both of those components are equally compelling to me. The more people we can serve, the more we can raise the bar, the more successful Lawft is.
Well, as we kind of wrap up here, and we've talked a lot about why you started Lawft and kind of what your early barriers were, the struggles or the doubts that you had, and kind of how far you've come in your feature development and where you see the launch happening, and ideally who you think would be a good use case, for a Lawft client. Tell me, is there anything about Lawft that we haven't already talked about that you want our viewers to know?
I think this is bigger than Lawft. It is our passion about law firm growth, and I hope that translates into the platform. But that's what this podcast is about. That's what the book is about. And we are here as a resource for anyone who's interested in growing their law firm.
I agree. I think the way I think about Lawft now and in 5 years, what I want people to say about it is that Lawft made it possible, right? This idea that people wanted to grow their business, they wanted to grow their practice, they wanted to service more people, they wanted to be more accessible, that Lawft made that possible for them. It became the avenue by which they could accomplish their goals. And what used to be the barrier to them accomplishing those goals, technology, right? And all of the struggles and the issues that you and I faced, early on, once removed, they're able to realize their full potential. So that's it for episode 10, All Things Lawft. Thank you so much for joining us on Tapped In.